Imagine winning a race and celebrating so wildly the whole sport says, "Nope, that's banned now." Or a teenager shaking up Formula One so much he changed the rules before he even had a driver's license. Welcome to F1, where legends don't just smash records, they smash rule books. The boy wonder who rewrote the age limit. Let's kick things off with the guy who probably forced more rule changes than any other driver, and he did it all before he even hit 20. Max Verstappen stormed into Formula One like a meteor, crashing straight into a calm pond, becoming the youngest driver ever to race at just 17 years and 3 days old. Yeah, you heard that right. While most teens were busy figuring out how to parallel park, Max was already racing at speeds that would make your heart stop. Now imagine being a veteran F1 driver, someone who's been around the block a dozen times, and suddenly you're duking it out wheel to wheel with a kid who technically shouldn't even have a regular driver's license yet. Talk about a wild card. Verstappen's aggressive style was legendary. He didn't just toe the line, he bulldozed right through it. Every corner, every overtake, every inch of the track was Max's playground, and he wasn't exactly playing nice. The veteran drivers? Let's just say they weren't thrilled. They saw Max as this fearless, rule-bending machine, and honestly, it rattled them. The FIA noticed too. So what did they do? They hit the brakes hard on teenage talent, introducing a brand new rule that bumped the minimum age for F1 drivers up to 18. This Verstappen rule means Max is stuck in the history books forever as the youngest driver to race in Formula One, because nobody younger can even get close now. But here's the thing, Max's impact didn't stop with age limits. His fearless, aggressive driving forced the sport to rethink how drivers could defend their positions on track, shaking up the rule book in ways that still ripple through racing today. The move that changed defensive driving forever. Now, this is where things got really spicy. Other drivers on the grid weren't just annoyed by Verstappen's teenage bravado, they were downright terrified of his unpredictable moves on track. Max had this wild habit of swerving all over the place while braking, throwing other drivers into impossible situations. They either had to slam the brakes and back off or risk a full-on collision that could send both cars flying. The tipping point came at the 2016 Japanese Grand Prix. Picture this, Max and Lewis Hamilton, two giants duking it out in a fierce battle. Hamilton tries to overtake at turn 16, expecting a clean pass. But Max, he moved under braking so aggressively and so late that Hamilton had to slam on the brakes and take the escape road just to avoid a crash. Even Hamilton, a 7-time world champ, known for his cool under pressure, was left shaking his head at how crazy that move was. That was the last straw for the FIA. Charlie Whiting, the race director at the time, wasn't about to let drivers risk their necks on stunts like that anymore. So he dropped a new rule. Any driver who moves radically or unnecessarily slowly while braking in a way that endangers others would face immediate punishment. This became known unofficially as the Max Verstappen rule, and it completely rewrote how drivers are allowed to defend their positions in Formula One. But don't think Verstappen was done. Nope. He still had plenty of tricks up his sleeve to push the sport and the rules to their limits. The safety car trick that confused champions. Jump ahead to 2021, and Verstappen pulled off a move so clever it left even Lewis Hamilton scratching his head. Safety car restarts had always been pretty straightforward, line up behind the leader and wait your turn. But Max, he decided to rewrite that playbook by positioning his car right alongside the leader instead of sitting obediently behind. This wasn't just a sneaky tactic, it was pure genius wrapped in a little bit of chaos. By lining up beside the leader, Max could leap off the line the moment the safety car peeled away, leaving the rest of the pack stumbling to catch up. It was like sneaking through the door before anyone else even realized the party had started. The most infamous moment? The 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, a race that ended with Max snatching the world championship from Hamilton in a finish that's still debated in corners of F1 fandom. That restart strategy played a massive role in giving Max the jump he needed, and the drama that followed sent shockwaves through the sport. Of course, the FIA wasn't going to let that slide. They came down fast and hard, releasing new event notes to make it crystal clear, lining up alongside another car before the safety car restart is off limits. No ifs, ands, or buts. The loophole Max had exploited so perfectly was slammed shut. Once again, Max found a way to push the boundaries, shake up the status quo, and force the sport to rewrite the rules. It's almost like every time the FIA says no, Max hears "try harder." The victory celebration that was too epic. Now, this one's my favorite Verstappen rule change because it really shows how petty Formula One can get sometimes. After winning the 2021 Styrian Grand Prix, Max decided to celebrate like every motorsport fan dreams of, with a massive burnout right on the pit straight. The crowd went absolutely nuts. The team was buzzing, and Max looked like he was having the time of his life putting on a show that no one would forget. But the FIA, they weren't having it. Race director Michael Masi basically threw a fit and told Red Bull that celebrations like that would not be tolerated anymore. Apparently, doing a burnout was ruining the competitive nature of the sport. Yeah, you heard that right. One of the coolest victory celebrations in all of motorsport got banned because it was apparently just too awesome for Formula One. Max, being the cheeky driver we know, shot back with a grin. "I'll try to do a donut next time." But in the end, he had to call it off and stop the burnouts. So, thanks to the FIA's rulebook, fans were robbed of one of the most exciting and visually epic post-race traditions in racing. It's funny how the biggest celebration in motorsport history can get crushed by an organization that's usually all about speed, thrills, and pushing limits. Guess Formula One likes to keep its party a little more buttoned up. The tragedy that changed everything. Now, let's switch gears and get a bit more serious. This is the story of Jules Bianchi, a name that might not ring as loudly as some others, but whose impact on Formula One safety is absolutely massive. Jules was a promising talent, steadily climbing the ranks until he finally broke into F1. But at the 2014 Japanese Grand Prix, everything changed. It was a rainy day at Suzuka, conditions so treacherous that the track was slick and unforgiving. Jules lost control at the Dunlop curve, a spot already known for its dangers. His car slammed into a recovery vehicle that was clearing a crashed car just ahead. The crash was brutal. The force sent his car flying into the air, and debris rained down onto his cockpit. Jules fought for his life in a coma for 9 months before tragically passing away from his injuries. It was the first fatal race-related accident in over 2 decades. The whole F1 world was shaken. The FIA didn't waste time. They poured years into developing what would become the halo, that odd-looking ring over the driver's head that everyone thought was strange at first. But since then, it's been a literal lifesaver. Romain Grosjean's fiery crash in Bahrain proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. Jules Bianchi's story isn't just about tragedy. It's about how one heartbreaking moment sparked safety innovations that have saved countless lives. Sometimes the biggest rule changes come from the darkest moments in the sport, the Austrian legend's near-death experience. Let's dive into one of the darkest and most defining moments in F1 history, starring none other than Niki Lauda, the Austrian powerhouse who was already a 3-time world champion by 1976. The setting? The Nürburgring, a track so wild and unforgiving, it was almost as if it dared drivers to push their luck. Now, Lauda wasn't just any driver that day. He had actually tried to get his fellow racers to boycott the event. He saw the danger plain as day and wasn't shy about saying the FIA was dropping the ball on safety. But when not enough drivers signed on, pressure from Ferrari forced him to suit up, even though he knew the risks were sky high. Just 2 laps into the German Grand Prix, disaster struck. Lauda's Ferrari careened off the track and exploded into flames after hitting the barrier. Imagine being trapped in a fiery inferno, and that's exactly what happened to Niki. It took the heroic effort of fellow drivers who pulled him from the wreckage to save his life. He survived, but with terrible burns and scars that would follow him forever. This crash was a brutal wake-up call for Formula One. The FIA took a hard look at the Nürburgring and realized something. No amount of tinkering could make that 14-mile beast safe for modern F1 racing, so they made the tough call, out with the Nürburgring from the calendar. Sometimes the best way to fix a problem is to just remove it altogether. Niki Lauda's crash didn't just change his life, it changed the course of Formula One safety forever. The most shameful scandal in F1 history. Now, this next story takes us into the darker side of Formula One, where cheating and corruption aren't just whispers behind the scenes, but full-blown scandals that shook the sport to its core. Not all rule changes come from daring driving or tragic accidents. Sometimes they come from drivers willing to risk everything, even lives, just to grab a win. Enter Nelson Piquet Jr., a young driver caught in one of F1's most infamous moments, the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix. In a move that still sends chills down the spine of fans, Piquet deliberately crashed his car into the wall at around 62 miles per hour. Not by accident, but on purpose. Why? To help his teammate Fernando Alonso get a huge advantage. Here's how the scheme worked. Alonso had made an early pit stop right before Piquet's accident. When Nelson crashed and the safety car was deployed, everyone else on the track had to slow down, burning fuel and ruining their race strategies. Meanwhile, Alonso's early stop gave him a massive fuel advantage, allowing him to sprint to victory despite starting way back in 15th place. This wasn't just cheating, it was recklessly dangerous. Piquet risked crashing at high speed, putting himself and others in serious danger just to manipulate the race result. The worst part? The FIA had no clue this was deliberate until Piquet confessed the following year after Renault dropped him from the team. It sparked outrage across the F1 world, with many believing Prost had been unfairly denied the title. The uproar was so loud that it took until 1991 for the FIA to scrap the best results system entirely. Since then, F1 has used a much simpler and fairer rule. Every point from every race counts. No math wizardry required. The fashion battle that changed everything. Fast forward to modern times, and we find ourselves in the middle of one of Formula One's most unexpected rule showdowns. A battle not about engines, tires, or even driving styles, but about jewelry. Yes, jewelry. And at the center of it all, none other than Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, activist, and global fashion icon, going head-to-head with the FIA over nose rings and earrings. It all began in 2023 when the FIA decided to strictly enforce a decades-old but largely overlooked rule banning drivers from wearing jewelry during races. On paper, the reasoning seemed solid. Officials argued that metal accessories could become hazardous in the event of a crash, potentially causing burns, interfering with fireproof gear, or complicating emergency medical care. But enforcing this rule in the modern era, particularly against someone as influential as Hamilton, was always going to be messy. And Hamilton wasn't having it. For him, this wasn't just about fashion, when it was about freedom, individuality, and standing up for what he believed was right. His jewelry wasn't a stunt, it was part of his identity. His style, from layered necklaces to diamond studs, had become as iconic as his on-track performances. He showed up to press conferences intentionally adorned in rings, chains, and earrings as a direct message, "I won't be silenced." He even skipped a practice session in protest, fueling media frenzy and fan debates across social media. But then came the twist that threw the entire debate into chaos. Hamilton revealed that some of his jewelry, like his nose stud, was actually medically welded in and couldn't be removed without minor surgery. That's right, the FIA was now essentially demanding that one of the most famous athletes in the world undergo a medical procedure just to satisfy an old, barely enforced regulation. Talk about a PR nightmare. Fans were outraged. Critics argued that it was a distraction from more pressing safety issues like track conditions or car performance standards. Supporters of Hamilton saw the rule enforcement as outdated, tone-deaf, and even borderline invasive. Faced with mounting pressure and growing backlash, the FIA had to make a decision. And to their credit, they eventually chose reason. They granted Hamilton a medical exemption, citing concerns over disfigurement with frequent attempts at removal. It was an awkward climb down for the FIA, but a much-needed one. Not only did it avoid unnecessary conflict with one of F1's biggest names, but it also opened up a broader conversation about bodily autonomy, cultural expression, and modernizing old rules that no longer serve the same purpose. More importantly, it was a rare and symbolic victory for individuality in a sport that's notorious for rigid conformity. Hamilton didn't just win the right to wear his nose stud, he reminded the world that sometimes pushing back against authority matters even when the issue seems small. Because in Formula One, where drivers are often expected to follow team orders, wear identical fire suits, and speak in carefully managed press sound bites, someone like Lewis Hamilton standing his ground, even over something as seemingly trivial as jewelry, becomes a powerful act of resistance. And in doing so, he didn't just make a fashion statement, he made a point. The bouncing cars that changed physics. Our final story dives into one of the most recent and visually bizarre issues Formula One has had to tackle: porpoising. If you watched any races in 2022, especially early in the season, you probably saw it. Cars violently bouncing up and down on the straights like lowriders at a car show. But this wasn't some quirky design feature. It was a serious aerodynamic flaw, and for drivers like Lewis Hamilton, it became an actual health concern. So what caused it? Porpoising emerged as a side effect of the 2022 ground effect regulations, which aim to increase downforce by sucking the car closer to the ground. But at high speeds, that suction could suddenly break, causing the car to lift and then slam back down, over and over. It looked chaotic from the outside, but inside the cockpit, it was even worse. Drivers were being rattled like maracas at 200 miles per hour. Hamilton was one of the loudest voices in the paddock, describing back pain, blurred vision, and even micro-concussions from the constant pounding. He warned that this wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Some rivals, including Max Verstappen, argued teams could just raise their car ride heights to reduce the effect. But for Mercedes, that wasn't a real option. They were already at the edge of their performance window, and further changes would have made their car uncompetitive. With drivers publicly raising health concerns, the FIA couldn't ignore it. They investigated and, by 2023, made a pivotal change. They increased the minimum floor edge height by 15 millimeters. This tweak helped reduce porpoising across the grid, leveling the playing field and protecting driver well-being. It was another clear case of safety trumping speed, a reminder that even in a sport obsessed with performance, human health still comes first. So there you have it, the jaw-dropping, tragic, and even rebellious moments that didn't just make headlines, they rewrote the entire Formula One rulebook. From Max Verstappen forcing the FIA to rethink teenage drivers, to Jules Bianchi's heartbreaking crash that led to the halo, to Lewis Hamilton standing up for personal freedom with a nose piercing. These aren't just stories, they're milestones in motorsport history. Formula One evolves not just through technology or engineering breakthroughs, but through the drivers who challenge the status quo. Every rule, every safety innovation, every change to the sport was sparked by someone bold enough to go too far, speak up, or break the mold. These rule breakers didn't just race, they redefined racing. And the next time you're watching an F1 race, remember the next big change might already be in motion. Because in Formula One, the only thing faster than the cars is the pace of change. If you loved this dive into the rebels who reshaped F1, hit that like button, subscribe for more insane motorsport stories, and drop a comment. Which driver do you think changed F1 the most? Let's debate in the comments.